What's up guys, it's Will back again, and today's review is Loving. Loving is a historical drama romance film that was written and directed by Jeff Nichols and primarily follows Ruth Negga and Joel Edgerton's character Mildred and Richard Loving. These two are based on actual historical figures of the same name and are of importance because they helped fight against discrimination back in the late 50s and 60s. Richard and Mildred are a happy couple living in Virginia, and eventually they decide that they want to get married. Well, since it's illegal for interracial couples to marry in 1958 Virginia, the couple decides to head to Washington, D.C. and get married there instead. They live in rural Virginia, and eventually the police get word of their union and decide that it's unlawful in the state of Virginia no matter where the ceremony took place. The two are imprisoned and eventually forced to leave the state for 25 years or simply renounce their marriage. The Lovings decide to leave the state, but this case gains some attention and eventually finds its way to the Supreme Court in 1967 in the infamous case of Loving v. Virginia. And the rest of the film is spent watching the Lovings attempt to go about their lives while being discriminated against, while all the while remaining hopeful that they'll be allowed to make their way back to their true home in Virginia and live in peace. Okay, so this was actually one that I was pretty excited for because when I watched the trailer, it seemed like one of those films that was gonna get a lot of Oscar buzz because of how dramatic it looked, and of course the subject matter it contains that ultimately brings to light how different and sometimes awful things were back in the 60s. I mean, it currently has a score of 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and to be honest, I think that's too high. While Loving certainly has some nice things going for it, the biggest problem I had with it was that sometimes I feel like it forgot to be a movie. What I mean by that is that there are plenty of stretches of time where the drama just isn't there, and it feels more like a documentary that's documenting the Lovings' lives rather than a movie that's meant to entertain. I really had a problem with the pacing because, as I said, there's too many stretches of time where it feels like nothing is really happening, and I'm not sure where this lack of entertainment value comes from because I'm sure that the Loving family had a ton of interesting things documented throughout their lives. For some reason, it just didn't translate to the big screen very well. Don't get me wrong though, there's a handful of scenes scattered throughout this film's 2-hour runtime that really worked well and ultimately served the purpose of getting me invested in the Loving family and their fight for fair and equal treatment under the law. I think if I had to pick, I'd probably say that Act 1 is the best of the three just because I feel like there's more entertainment value present there. The main problems I had with Acts 2 and 3 is that they take a lot of time to show us things that we've seen a ton of already. So it's sort of like beating you over the head with the same routine over and over again, and this lack of diversity really becomes pretty frustrating because it can start to feel like you're stuck in a time loop or something. And in Act 3, when Nick Kroll's character comes into play as this case begins to gain traction and ultimately head to the Supreme Court, you're going to be left very cold by what is actually delivered to you. You get like a couple shots of the courtroom, but that's it. No exciting legal battles, no drama, nothing. You would think this is where the conflict between bad, the state of Virginia, and good, the Loving family, comes to a head in an exciting and dramatic court battle, but nope, you never get to see the inside of the courtroom besides a few opening remarks. So this film doesn't even really have a climax. There's no point where you're going to feel like the conflict is really hitting the tipping point, it just never gets there. But let's transition to some things I did like about Loving. Firstly, the acting performances. There are only really two characters of real significance, and that's Mildred Loving played by Ruth Negga and Richard Loving played by Joel Edgerton. I thought they were both pretty good in this one, but honestly I don't think these are Oscar-worthy performances because they're not really asked to do a lot. They each do a good job in their respective role, but there's not like a handful of scenes where you're just going to be floored by how good the acting is. There aren't enough impactful scenes in general to give you that, and the actors sort of suffer because of it. These are not bad performances at all, but if you're going to nominate an actor or actress for an Oscar, it has to be a next level performance, and I don't think these fall under that category. I also thought the cinematography was really awesome. I think this is one of the better shot films of the year because considering this is basically a two-character movie, the focus is the romance and plight of our two co-leads, and the filmmakers did a good job highlighting how this discrimination is affecting their lives. I also thought the dialogue was pretty well written as well. I felt a pretty decent connection between Ruth Negga and Joel Edgerton, and I think that's partially due to how genuine the conversations felt. I think the dialogue was nicely written because it allowed the dynamic and romance of these two lovers to shine through. Nothing ever feels overly preachy or like it has some sort of agenda. It just feels like conversations that two people deeply in love were having in an attempt to overcome adversity. But overall, I was fairly disappointed with Loving. For a film that I think had Best Picture aspirations, I think it definitely falls short. I did think it had some good acting performances, really nice cinematography, and well-written dialogue. Sadly, I also felt there is a severe lack of drama. The film moves at an incredibly slow pace. Acts 2 and 3 are repetitive and boring, and there is basically no climax whatsoever. I'm going to give Loving a 6.5 out of 10 and recommend that you pass on this one in theaters unless you love these two actors actors and feel like you have to see their work. So did you guys see Loving yet? What did you think of it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if not, let me know whether you'd be interested in watching this film or not. And as always, if you like this video, click that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for much more content like this. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and like me on Facebook for updates regarding this channel, movies, and everything else. That's all for now though. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next review.